Hey everybody, welcome back to Matrix Mash. I don't know what number we're on. I'm Emily Moyer from Off Planet Radio. Robert Phoenix is with me, and it's been a few weeks. We're ready to mash it up. We have a variety of interesting topics, some or none of which we may cover today. And Robert, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm good, Emily. I took the week off, did a little traveling, was in Nashville, which is a lovely city.
Mm-hmm.
Exploring some Tartarian architecture with the Parthenon there, watching some very low-flying military helicopters do maneuvers over the Parthenon while I was there, which I sent you the video real time.
Yep, they were after you, Robert.
Yep, that was really interesting.
You got your P for Parthenon hat on, huh?
The P for the Parthenon, that's right. So that was cool. And yeah, one of the things we're going to talk about is this whole kind of Tartarian or Tatarian, however.
I think it's Tartarian, the Tartars, yeah.
Tartars, right. But also the Tatars as well. There's two
Tatars.
ways.
Oh, I like that, the Tatars.
Tatars, right.
I like that, the Tatars.
That's interesting. We can kind of get into historically who the Tatars were, and if they are indeed connected with this kind of nomenclature and concept of the Tartarian civilization that theoretically created the buildings.
Before we get into the Tartarian, I just have to say that I went to Nashville once on the way when I was a freshman in college, and on my way back to West Virginia University because I was on a gymnastics team. We drove all the way across country, and we went to Nashville, and we went to the Grand Ole Opry, and you have to understand that, like, until this trip, I'd never been anywhere but a big city in my life. Nashville's a fairly big city, but I'd never seen those kind of country folk before. And just me and my sister were just fascinated at these people walking around with like turkey legs in their hands and all these like overweight people eating Twinkies. Like, we had never seen anything like it before. I mean, to this day, we still kind of laugh about it, but it was like totally different than going to an amusement park here. You know what I mean? They have the same kind of shit, but like, it was just fascinating for us to watch the people. I've never been to Nashville. I guess I was 18. I was an adult, but now I'd probably like to go there and eat and drink whiskey. But yeah, I had that interesting trip to. Have you ever been to the Grand Ole Opry?
No. I mean, we drove past it. Saw the signs on the freeway.
Yeah.
Thought about going there, but I just, I associate Nashville with Kathy O'Brien, and because she talks about Nashville being this hotbed of programming, which is really interesting because when I was there, the Predators, interesting name for a Nashville team, right? The Predators, hockey team. Anyway, the Predators, which are supposedly like a dinosaur, that's what the Predator is. The Predators have in hockey they have two periods like halftime. Yeah, I think it was the first period. They brought Lee Greenwood out to sing "God Bless the USA." He is, he does as he goes to all these different places, sings about 2 minutes of that, horrid song. And I don't have a problem with the USA, but he goes out there. He's made a career out of showing up and singing this song for about 2 minutes. Yeah. And Lee Greenwood is pretty prominent in Kathy O'Brien's book. I mean,
that's right. Yeah. I've never read the whole book, and it's been a long time since I read any of the clips and stuff from it. I will have to read her whole book at some point. I've never read it. Yeah.
So Kathy O'Brien's backstory, if people don't know who she is, she came out right around 2000 or so. Yeah. As kind of an MK Ultra sex slave. Bryce Taylor was sort of making the rounds then. Svali, and
Cisco Wheeler, all that kind of.
Cisco Wheeler, thank you. Yeah. So all that was happening then, and Kathy O'Brien's story is that her adult life with her daughter, she was handled by a guy who was a magician / clown. They lived between Nashville and Branson, Missouri, which is another one of these areas where apparently
Branson, Missouri is where the Chase the Maiden fields are all set up. Yeah, where they play the Hunger Games there. They call it Chase. They call it Chase the Maiden.
Interesting. Well, then we're into like Most Dangerous Game stuff, right?
Yeah, it's that, and then so it's just this is so fast. So what you're talking about this magician clown. So I'm going to respect privacy here, but when I was about 16 or 17, another gymnast I had known, who I'm just going to leave it at that, who had been an alternate on an Olympic team, had told me, and of course at this point when she told me this, I didn't know what it meant, but later I heard somebody else talking about a clown handler who was involved in her programming, and it's not Kathy O'Brien, it's somebody else. But this person lived in Memphis, which is also in Tennessee, and she had received flowers at her school one time signed Happy the Clown. And you know what I mean? She was receiving all of these things from this clown character with triggering kinds of lingo on it. Now, she doesn't know what this is. I haven't spoken to her in 30 years, 25 years. She doesn't know what this is. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. But when I heard, I can't remember if the person that I heard talking about this before was Solaris Blue Raven or someone else during that period of time, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, talk about this same clown. So it's interesting. I didn't know Kathy O'Brien had and Kathy O'Brien's, how old is Kathy O'Brien now? She's probably about the same age.
She's got to be in her late 50s or early 60s.
Yeah, so she's close. This person that I know would be a little bit younger than that. She'd be more than 50. She'd be in her early 50s. So it's interesting. We drove by the Magic Castle here in Los Angeles the other day, and my friend was like, "What's that?" She's new living here in Los Angeles, and I was like, "Oh, that's the Magic Castle." She's like, "Haven't I heard you talk about that before?" I'm like, "Yeah, I went to a birthday party there when I was 16." And then I started. Wasn't there a celebrity or someone that died in the closet at Magic Castle? I'm pretty sure there was some interesting thing. Somebody died. Maybe that's just a story I know from my own days and whatever. But I was trying to figure out after that, why would there be a 16-year-old's birthday party at the Magic Castle? And then I realized a girl who I was not even friends with at the gym had invited me to her birthday party. And we had gone there, and I'm like, oh, now I understand. The people who were picked to go there were all the girls who were in the program, right? Because I wasn't really friends with this person, but I went to the Magic Castle anyway. And, for the birthday party, I don't really have any memory of what went on there. But it's that they do use a lot of magic, clown, those kinds of characters as handlers or as trigger cues, things like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm looking at the death of the Magic Castle, and it's a magician by the name of Daryl Easton.
Mm-hmm.
And this was from February of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
A man was found dead at the Magic Castle, an exclusive private club in Hollywood that offers fine dining and magic shows.
Yep.
The Magic Castle identified the man as Daryl Easton, a well-known magician who performed at the venue last week. In the statement, the Magic Castle said Easton was an award-winning magician, and the police had told the organization he took his own life. The Magic Castle, which opened in 1963, bills itself as the most extraordinary private club in the world where history, art, and elegance combine to make miracles.
Yep.
Guests must be invited or accompanied by a member and are required to adhere to a strict dress code.
Yep. So how did I get in there? That's the part that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this guy, Daryl Easton, dies there. Says committed suicide, hanging, of course. That's I guess that's the death du jour.
Yep. But you can just look into all. I mean, I think the Magic Castle has come up in some of the documentation about mind control and MK Ultra and targeting and things like that. And some of the weird stuff with the pedophilia and the celebrities. And it's a weird place. It's right there off of Highland. It's on Highland and Franklin. Highland and Franklin. Is it Franklin or Fountain? I think it's Franklin. Highland and Franklin.
Yeah. So anyway, Lee Greenwood was there the night that I was there. God Bless the USA, and he shows up in Kathy O'Brien's book.
Yeah.
and along with the Mandrell sisters, Dolly Parton, Chris Christopherson, who's the
Dolly Parton and the Mandrell sisters are longtime MKs. Dolly Parton's one of the most interesting stories with that kind of thing. She's such a pleasant, likable person, but yeah, totally. Her husband's her handler. Yeah.
There's this guy Boxcar Willie, and I remember Boxcar Willie commercials as a kid growing up, and back in the 70s, they would have these commercials for artists like Slim Whitman, like, really, and you would say, call this number and get this these 3 records by Slim Whitman or whatever. And Boxcar Willie was one of those artists, and apparently Boxcar Willie was part of this whole thing too, right? So what's interesting is there's a video that you can find on YouTube. It's at a Sarah Palin rally when John McCain was running for president, and of course there's Lee Greenwood on stage singing "God Bless the USA." Sarah Palin has long been rumored as being an MK Ultra bunny, right? Because she came through the pageant circuit.
Yep.
And he's there on stage, and then right next to him is Linda Rothschild.
Yeah.
And then you have Sarah Palin next to her daughter Bristol, and she's doing this while Lee Greenwood's saying "God Bless the USA."
Fascinating. That's interesting.
So here I am, right, in Nashville, and there's Lee Greenwood singing "God Bless the USA" at a Predators game.
Interesting. So before we started today, Robert and I always chit-chat a bit, and we were talking about the similarities between Austin and Nashville. And Austin's ice hockey team are the Ice Bats. So both
not anymore. They're not the Ice Bats.
No?
They were the Ice Bats.
What are they now?
Now they're the Austin Stars, because the National Hockey League basically went in and started to make these cities their minor league hockey clubs. Now the Austin Ice Bats were an independent hockey team, but no longer. And they don't play in Austin anymore. They play in Cedar Park.
Well, that's interesting, because what I was going to say was it's interesting that both of these towns that are very similar, that are both huge hubs for music and mind control, for MK Ultra kind of stuff, and and these new super trendy kinds of cities that people are willing to sort of pack into and have their lives controlled in ways they don't even understand, both had prehistoric, somewhat predatory kinds of animals as their ice hockey team.
Well, I think they're like binary stars.
Yeah.
And even if you look at the colors of UT, which is University of Texas in Austin,
orange, yeah,
and then University of Tennessee, which is not in Nashville but in Knoxville, but still, large representation inside of Nashville. UT is burnt orange, and then University of Tennessee is bright orange.
Yeah,
and they both have T, right, like as part of their logo. And it was interesting because when I was at the Parthenon, which we can talk about. Yeah. When I was at the Parthenon, I went to this guy who was selling hot dogs and all beef sausages. And I decided to get one because I was hungry, and that's how the guy makes his living, whatever. So I got one. And his buddy was there, and his buddy was dressed in Texas garb. So he was from Austin. So here I am having a conversation with these two binary stars, just like right in front of me. Yeah. The Austin-Nashville connection. Yeah. Both are music cities, obviously, right? Both have their kind of, music experience streets.
Willie Nelson is a connection between the two as well. Both have, but both of them, I think, signify cities where country and rock and roll kind of come together.
Yeah, I would say so. But I what's interesting is rock and roll is dead.
Yeah.
And Nashville is now the epicenter of the remnants of rock and roll, right? They basically have taken rock and roll out of the picture, and you've got hip hop, and then you have country, right? Yeah. And that's kind of where we are now musically. And so Nashville has really, and I got my hair cut there, and I was on the street where all the music studios are. I mean, it's like just music studio. So it's also undergoing a very Austonian kind of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 sort of facelift. There are cranes everywhere.
It's disguised as gentrification. It's Agenda 2030 disguised as gentrification.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was really, again, like so much happened when I was there in a weird way. Like I was downtown and I was headed towards the Parthenon, and they had a major fire going on in one of these new buildings that they were creating, right? One of their new kind of mixed use spectacles, and it was like on fire. The crown of this building was on fire, big time. Wow. And all these, service vehicles and first responders flying in there. Then I go and I hit the Parthenon, and you've got the low-lying military helicopters flying, not just once, but like buzzing around the entire place 2 or 3 times, and low, right? Like, wow, this is really a trip. And then Lee Greenwood's at the Predators game. It was, there was all this really interesting kind of like.
Nashville was playing out your MK Ultra mind control program for you, Robert.
Well, it was almost like, it was like, in some ways, it was like I was in the simulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet I felt like I was kind of moving through. It was almost like the Disneyland of like kind of MK Ultra simulation stuff.
It's crazy how there are days when the simulation just completely reveals itself to you. When you're like, there's days when the world seems real, and there's other days when the world's like, you're like, this is so fake, dude. This is all made up, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting. I don't think we're in the same place every day. Like, some days I feel like I'm in a world that's somewhat is reminiscent of the world that I knew when I was little. And other days, I just feel like I'm in the Truman Show or on the set at Disneyland, or like when you're at a place like Caesar's Palace, where it's like you can't tell if you're outside or inside in that shopping center at Caesar's Palace. Like it feels like that sometimes, So yeah.
Well, I think that's a good transition for what we're going to talk about.
Alrighty.
Next half hour, which is the historical / post-historical / current reset. Because I think what you're seeing is you're seeing, the segue of the reset, because that's I'm pretty sure that's what's going on right now.
Everything is being revealed as part of the reset, but you got to pay attention to catch it.
That's right. So what we're, what kind of sparked a lot of what we're going to talk about for me was, knowing about the Tartarian stuff, which a lot of people already know about. But I was kind of floating around on the fringe because I got a lot of other stuff that I'm kind of working on and dealing with. Oh, look who's here.
We have a special guest.
Who's this?
This is Olivia.
Olivia.
Mm-hmm. You met Olivia before. She's played with Jasper. Right. Yes. She's meowing, so I'm assuming I think she really wants to go outside, but she's going to have to settle for being on camera.
She's a beauty.
Yes, she is. She's 17 years old.
You're kidding me.
Nope.
She's in great shape.
Mm-hmm. She's doing well. She's doing well.
Keep on rocking in the free world, Olivia. And so I decided to, dive into the Tartarian stuff, like head first. And I started to watch John Levy's.
His videos are great. John Levi, yeah.
They're really great. Now, the one thing that I will say is that he does a really great job of asking very great questions, rhetorical questions, and gets you to think about things without saying this is what it is, and creating kind of like this cul-de-sac, which I think is really good. At the same time, there's also like, well, let's go a little bit deeper. How did these people get here? Where did they come from? Is there a difference between the Tartarians and the giants? And if so, what are those differences? And so it gets, once you go into that rabbit hole, man, it gets really, really deep. And you get into the whole flood, the mud flood and all this stuff that really seems to kind of happen around 1850.
Or at least the last time around happened around 1850.
Right, 1849, 1850 is where all of a sudden there's this literal tectonic shift and figurative tectonic shift in population distribution. By the way, 1850, I looked it up, that's when the majority of, it's not the majority, but first wave immigrants, theoretically from England to both New Zealand and Australia, primarily Australia, began to happen. There's a very interesting kind of immigration wave here in Fredericksburg, right around 1848. The Germans show up in the hill country. So there's some stuff going on here around this time. And the premise here is that something happened that represents a reset, that there were these structures that were already here, people discovering these structures, and then beginning to create a new narrative out of these structures, or new kind of post-historical or post-Tartarian, if you want to call it, narrative.
And people and these people not understanding how these structures really work. These structures were designed sort of as possibly free energy devices. None of these structures had wiring or electricity as we know it, but things that require electricity had happened in these buildings prior, and the people who now were living with them did not know how to use them.
They didn't know, yeah, and Levi, he winds up, has a whole video that's dedicated to the fireplaces of Europe, which is a really good video. If you
haven't seen that one, there's so many. I've only watched a few because
So basically, the fireplaces were not fireplaces. Like if you look at them, they're like these chimneys that are not open.
They're just like amplifiers, like antennas or something, right?
Right, and they have these grates on, not even grates, they're like the things that are in front of these chimneys that are they're like conductors.
Yeah.
So then what happens is that, what he calls the new people wind up moving into these areas. And because it gets cold, they knock out these chimneys and start burning wood inside these buildings. It's not a very efficient way to heat your space.
Right.
No. So anyway, I dove into this and I started to really kind of look at it from where we are now. And I've determined that we're in the midst of another reset. And then I even did a show last night where astrologically I looked at where certain planets were in 1850, specifically 1850, 1851. If you go back to 1848, 1849, there was a Pluto-Uranus conjunction, which is very rare, by the way, astrologically, in the sign of Aries, and is at the 28th, 29th degree of Aries. And Aries represents the springtime. New, right? It's the vernal equinox. So astrologically, that is the time of sort of this reset. It's the new time, right? Like every year when we go into March 22nd, 23rd, that is the beginning of the astrological new year. It's a new time. And when you look at the Pluto-Uranus conjunction, which is quite rare, by the way.
Yeah.
Quite rare. And you have it in Aries, which is the new time. You can make a case that aspect alone is the marker of the reset.
So I would say that makes sense. I would say the reset is a long process, and at a certain point becomes like the pinpoint of it. And I would say that this version of the reset started about the time the Beatles were introduced. And I think
it's the Kennedy timeline, the assassination of Kennedy, and everything that moves forward post 11/22/63.
Yeah, I have an interesting theory that at some point I have a particular guest that I would like to have on to talk about it. So I'm just going to give a little bit of what I think here, because there's a particular guest who I think this would be a phenomenal and fascinating show. But I think that the Beatles music is part of what it lulls people into that state that allows the reset to happen. And I think that I kind of came up with this idea when that movie called, what's that movie about the Beatles that was out recently where only one guy remembers it?
Yes, I know the one you're talking about. Is it like Imagine or something like that?
No, it's called it starts with an R, but whatever, I think. But I think what happens here is there's something about that music that lulls people to sleep. And I think in every reset, a different version of that same music is presented to the public. And the people in charge of controlling this process in this version of the reset or in this reality is Tavistock. right? And they introduce all these cultural things that have been introduced in all of the resets prior, but in a slightly different way, right? A different version each time. And that the Beatles music, for some of us, like, so when this movie came out where it was like only this one guy remembered it and nobody else did, so he reintroduced it. To me, that was sort of like the clue or the putting out there in your face, right? There's so many people were so moved and so in love with the Beatles music. And then there's a few people who, like myself, I don't understand how people like this shit. This shit is boring. It's not interesting. And it's almost like I've fucking heard this dumb song before, right? So like there's some people who have been through this before, maybe in another iteration and another incarnation or in a parallel reality, that when this music comes in, we recognize like this is fucking boring music. But the rest of the culture, it moves them into this space of drugs and hedonism and mind control and complete culture creation and whatever that then allows that's sort of like have you when they do like it makes it so that they can get the things all set into place that they need for the reset to happen, right? And you talked to me this weekend about what you think. You decoded some things about this version of the reset. In each version of the reset, the population is sort of replaced in a different way, and you have an idea about how it's going to be replaced this time. Are you ready to get there, or?
So one of the things that I wanted to show here.
Okay.
I'm just gonna reference my own work a little bit.
I like that.
Because
you have a lot of work, so yeah.
I've done a lot of stuff on this, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a post that I did. 9/11, Jesus' birthday, summer of love, Jupiter and Cancer.
Yep, that's it. Reclaiming the timeline. There you go.
And I wrote this on 9/11, 2013. And this is a cover of Time magazine, The Jesus Revolution. And you can see where this is taking place on June 21st, which is the 29th degree of Gemini. This is where time is actually, 1971, right in the heart of right at the beginning, the nape of the Neptune and Sagittarius aspect. And there was a lot of really interesting sort of Jesus iconography, movies about the life of Jesus, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, Jesus Christ Superstar. It wasn't just Jesus. It was a time of like gurus and teachers. Very interesting time. So we get
look at how that picture also looks like some iterations of John Lennon too.
Right. It's kind of John Lennon meets Peter Max.
Yeah.
Psychedelia.
Yeah.
Right? And it's always about time, right? Time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I got into this chart, this idea of Jesus being born on September 11th.
Oh, look at the geometry of that chart. That's fascinating geometry right there.
Yeah, totally fascinating. And of course, there's Jupiter at that point in time. Regulus, fixed star Regulus, was at 2 degrees Leo, which is the star of the kings. We have a Jupiter Regulus conjunction in the chart. I don't want to get into too much heavy astrology, but right after Lenin, right after JFK dies, and we have the rollout of the Beatles,
mm-hmm.
Guess what happens in New York City? The World's Fair.
Yeah.
And the World's Fair is very
mm-hmm.
prominent in this whole story of Tartaria and these World's Fairs that happen after the turn of the century. And so the reset, to your point, begins right here.
Yeah.
It begins right here. And so we're living in kind of the long evolution of the reset, and we're in kind of the final chapters.
Yep, we're getting down to it. Yep.
There's stuff with the Beatles.
Yeah, go back to that picture. Go back. Roll back up. Randy, go back to the photo with the moon with the rays sticking off of it, or sun or whatever. Randy's been using this photo as part of his new series, The Eye of the Needle. This very similar photo to this. Yeah, that's interesting. That's there too.
Yeah, this is Altair. This is Altair, the fixed star Altair.
Okay.
Eagle, and also known as the Pillar of Heaven.
So he was looking at the eclipse, I think. There's a picture of the eclipse that looks like this as well, but it's almost the exact same picture, but just during the daylight as opposed to at night. Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I used to converse with this guy, Rob Tillett, who was this really interesting astrologer from Australia, and he was like kind of my early guide into the fixed stars.
Mm-hmm.
And he says about Altair brings sudden but ephemeral fortune associated with impulsiveness and courage. It can also be associated with accidents. It rules astrology and writing, gives great imagination, strong passions. So I was looking specifically at Altair inside of the chart of Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fixed star, and you can see it. It's over here in the sign of. See, that's Aldebaran. Where's Altair here? Give me a second.
When I'm looking at that geometry of that, it looks like a pyramid with an envelope in front of it, right?
Well, so this is a mystic rectangle.
Yeah.
And then this is this pyramid, and then all these planets align in Virgo, and I set the chart at 0 Aries, which puts everything in the house of service, right? So one of the things that that I was able to look at, it's not in this post, it's in another post where I was looking at the Kennedy stuff, and it has to do with the release of the Beatles records. And the Beatles records get released on a very interesting series of timelines. Let me throw this up here really quickly. So this is this gets into the kind of the post-historical JFK period. So you have with the Beatles, right? And this is theoretically the first record that the Beatles released. And they don't release it here in the United States, in North America, they release it in Canada. So on the same day that Kennedy was killed, the Beatles, this is their second release. The Beatles released their second LP with the Beatles, which was the first in North America. Previous record, Please Please Me, made its debut on 3/22/63, which is the beginning. Guess what that is? That's like 0 Aries, right? The beginning of something new. So the vernal equinox. So this record comes out like the same day that Kennedy is killed.
Oh, this is interesting.
Canada. Of course, we have, the duality piece, the shadow and the light.
Yeah. And,
right.
and also I'm looking down because I've almost paid no attention to the Beatles because their music just bores me to death. But I'm seeing here that they have an album called the White Album, which contains Revolution #1 and Revolution #9.
That's right. It's in there.
So basically, maybe they're letting us know that this is the 9th reset, right? This is we're doing this for the 9th time now. Here we go, kids. Right? Yeah.
So if you look at the releases, 9/11, 3/22, 11/22, and in 1968 they released the White Album on 11/22.
Yeah.
Right, which has Revolution 1 and Revolution 9.
Yeah, and Helter Skelter. Yeah.
The Kennedy assassination.
Wow.
Right. So there's.
So where was Come Together? You have something about roll back up a little bit. You have something about Come Together. Stop right there. The Summer of Love, not just the U.S. but in the world, but the world's aligned to truly come together. So that was the beginning right there. That you have to bring everyone together, like with all this. But it's a different way of saying one world come to. That's actually one of the only Beatles songs I like is Come Together.
So here's my theory: is my belief the Kennedy assassination is more than just a conspiracy or even a dark magical ritual. It was an event that hacked and altered this timeline. As a result of Kennedy's death, the exact time, we're now occupying the shadow of the age of Aquarius, a darker alternate manifestation of what was supposed to occur, which would have been a more true and organic realization of unity consciousness, rather than the current synthetic version, which would be peddled by another Gemini 2 decades later. We're talking Gemini George Bush and the New World Order. So, and
Robert, you are so good. Robert, you're just a genius. You're so good.
It's truly aligned to come together. What really happened was that it was ripped apart, torn asunder, trampled underfoot by trauma after trauma. So, this is some of the stuff that I was doing, 7 years ago, 6, 7 years.
Robert, you're so good. You're a genius. One day the world will recognize it.
What I am is I'm insatiably curious, and I'm not afraid to go into areas that other people might think are nuts. Right? So, but where we are now is we're in the midst of this other reset, which if you want, we can kind of fast forward. It's going to be controversial. And this may trigger some people.
Trigger warning, go find your safe space.
Let you know. So I'm gonna hand the baton off to you.
All right.
And you kind of lay out what you think or how you see this new version of the reset manifesting, and I'll come in and I'll backfill, and I'll take the heat for kind of where we might be going with this.
Well, it is. I mean, obviously, we're going through some weird kind of depopulation agenda that involves. Like, it's not like a straight up genocide, like a Stalin or a Mao kind of thing. It involves like taking people out of their human form with different kinds of transhumanism, right? And transmutation. I think there's a lot of transmutation going on, but it's other people practicing alchemy on your body, not you practicing alchemy on your own body. So I think there's transhumanism, transmutation going on. There's obviously a certain kind of death of the white man, the white person, on a certain level that is different than I'm not saying that white people are being taken out and killed, but they're being dehumanized. They're being genetically selected against through certain kinds of genetic weaponry, through chemtrails, through things in our diet and whatnot. So you have, this is not going to be a white country or a white world very much longer. And whatever your feelings about that, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, is really irrelevant. It is what's happening. And so a lot of people think, and I think this was a mislead, people think that, oh, the people in control just want to get everybody off the planet so they can have it to themselves. Wrong. They need people here because people are the batteries that this simulation is run off of, right? But when the batteries become too feisty, right? When some of the highest octane batteries become too feisty, they replace them with a cheaper or a different or a new, sometimes, whatever. It's not that it's better or worse, a different model. Right. And so we're seeing a hollowing out of what was and a replacement with what will be or what is, right? And I had not really thought about, and in the process of this, everything is being revealed. So Robert mentioned something to me the other day about what the next population replacement is going to be. Like in some of these other resets, you had like orphaned children brought from one part of the world to another part of the world. Looked like a lot of Eastern European children, maybe brought to places like San Francisco and things like that. We're going to have a different kind of population replacement this time. And I hadn't really looked at it this way until Robert came to me with his theory the other day. So,
yeah. So what I found, what I've been, because I watch a fair amount of TV. I'm not afraid to admit that. But the TV that I watch tends to be sports oriented, and because number one, it's an escape, and number two, I think sports. Before you could look at you could look at music as being a precursor to what would happen culturally, whether it was jazz, whether it was rock and roll. Like there were things going on musically, and then the rest of the culture would catch up. Well, we know that music has been kind of a dead end now. So music has been replaced by sports. So you can figure out where things are going culturally by paying attention to sports. And so as a result of that, I see a lot of commercials. Most of the commercials I see, you would think, would be geared towards theoretical males, in most cases, maybe white males, depending upon sport, particularly football, maybe less so with basketball, certainly with baseball, and even more so with hockey, if you can even find a hockey game on TV. Anyway, the majority of the commercials that I see tend to be, number one, featuring women. Like, why are they featuring women during these male sporting events? And
it's not like women, like sexy women that should be like a turn on to the men. It's like
it's not like Joey Heatherton putting shaving cream on Joe Namath's face,
right?
Which is a commercial that actually happened,
right?
No, this is about women who are driving cars, driving SUVs, because primarily
women who are the boss of us.
Right, but primarily they would have commercials where they would try to sell products to men. If you're a man, here's a car for you, man. Right, here's a car for you. Boom. That's not happening anymore. Okay. The other thing is that, again, I'm going to say something that may trigger people, but if you look at the majority of commercials that are on TV now, you kind of have to scratch your head and ask, where did all the white people go? Because we're seeing this influx of programming and marketing and advertising that is almost, I'd say about 65, 70%, maybe 75% so-called Black and African American. And then the ones that aren't are promoting mixing. Like there's a commercial out now where you see what this is really interesting. It's a car commercial, right? And you see this young Black guy, young white woman, and they're coming out of a car dealership. And they keep coming out of the same car dealership over time. And they're like a different couple. But theoretically, they're the same couple over time.
Yeah.
So there's this whole time thing going on. So there's the reset is already happening, right? If you
we're in the final stages.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is that I'll bring this up here. This is because I had this last night. If I can see if I can find this thing, I may not be able to find. Anyway, there was like if you go onto Google and you type in European people history, what you'll see the image-wise for these Google results, that the majority of the people of Europe are Black. Like historically, like we're going back 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th century. These are the search results you're getting. You can look it up, right? So then I found a website that tried to explain why this is happening. And
why is this happening?
Well, they said that certain groups were like Google bombing. Like there's a phrase now called Google bombing.
Right.
And it's like you go in and you type all these results in so that the algorithm picks it up and then all of a sudden starts feeding everything in. Well, that's one way of looking at it, right? I mean, it's particle or wave, but the fact of the matter is that there's already this historical precedent where we're seeing now that the modern version of the Library of Alexandria is showing that there are very different records of who existed during a different time. Right? So we're seeing this now with commercials. We're seeing this now with Google. And there are two things that I wanted to bring up. And again, this is very controversial. But I don't care. I mean, I'm witnessing this thing. And that could be any freaking skin tone. I'd still be witnessing it. But what we're seeing is this march towards transhumanism and the end of the human, the end of the biological human, through the promotion of transgenderism, which we talked about. And then this deep promotion of racial mixing, which creates a new race. And I talked about this a long time ago, that the objective is the golden race. It is the great eugenic experiment.
Right.
And then theoretically, when you have the golden race, you have the resolution of duality, that white and Black are now combined to create this new sort of historical and biological human, which has no historical precedent, right? So if you have somebody who, kind of looks a certain way, like Amber Rose or something like that, or Steph Curry, how much do they relate in some ways to their European historical roots, or how much do they even relate in some ways to their deep, deep Black or Moorish roots? They can't even relate to that. Right, they're in this weird intersection.
So it's removing history, which is what a reset is about. So it's removing history. Yeah,
absolutely. And they're doing it in a number of different ways.
So the holistic or organic resolution of duality would be, Black people, white people living in this world together, respecting each other, not, what I mean? Like appreciating the differences between cultures, but getting along and treating each other with respect. But instead what we're doing is removing the fact that either existed on their own and creating a race of alien. And I'm not saying alien is like a derogatory thing, but we're creating a new human being. And for humans, when they see something that is different than they are, it becomes the other. So some of these people who are actually quite stunningly beautiful, when you first see them, some of these models and stuff that are very, very mixed race, they do look otherworldly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, they're totally otherworldly. I think Tyra Banks was kind of like the first person who was really captivating at that level. It's like, you're just a new species.
Yeah. Well, Naomi Campbell and Tyra Banks were kind of both like that. Naomi Campbell, I think, is much more beautiful than Tyra Banks is.
But Tyra was golden.
Tyra is black.
Naomi, retained
black. Yeah.
Right, Tyra, like more of her melanation, right?
Yeah. Tyra Banks is black, and Tyra Banks also has that huge forehead, right? That almost looks alien-like. And when you look at Tyra Banks, sometimes she looks like a drag queen. She can't. If you really look at her, you can't tell if she's a man or a woman.
Yeah, another kind of media historical figure was Brandy.
Oh yeah, well she's got those really wide set eyes. She almost looks like Inuit or Eskimo or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So now, again, what we're seeing is these massive waves of people that are coming in from places like sub-Saharan Africa, Somalia, and they're moving into these new places like Italy, Spain, France, and they're moving into these areas where they didn't build those structures. Now, some people might say, well, Europe was really black at one point and the Moors built that, so they're say, I don't know. And this whole kind of, dance between sort of the Moorish migrations and the Tartarian.
But isn't that the whole point? The point is, I don't know. The point is to remove people's ability to know anything.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But if we look at it, let's just say it's let's play the Tartarian game. And that there was a group of people that moved into Western Europe, and those structures were already there, and they began to occupy them and figure it out, and they turned these kind of power plants into churches.
Right.
What happened.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened.
Right. So now you've got a new group of people that are coming in. They didn't build those structures.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this next wave of the reset.
You didn't build that. I was thinking of Obama saying, you didn't build that.
Right. So again, we're seeing this wave now, and over time, what will happen with the new wave mixing with the old wave, that we will have the golden race.
Mm-hmm.
And that the golden race will have no historical kind of precedent.
No.
And the golden race is the new version of the human and the reset.
And so, and this golden race will have elements of many different races and cultures, elements of technology, and even elements of like perhaps plant and animal life. Right, we're starting to see some of that with people saying that they're a hybrid of like a cat and a whatever. Right, so this is going to be like the boldly going where no human has ever gone kind of shit. Right.
Right, and some people will watch this video and they'll go, "Great, right? We'll finally be able to get over all of our shit, and we'll finally be able to be, one nation or one planet under a groove." But what people aren't understanding is that ultimately those people will be like pets in a zoo.
Yeah, I'd say we're close to that already.
Right.
In a lot of ways. I mean, when you were explaining to me about you went to a talk, you heard Del Bigtree speak, and you were explaining some of the things that are going on that we're not really aware of publicly yet with vaccines, and what you were saying, I'm thinking about, it's just like animals in the zoo getting their inoculations so that they don't pass diseases on to their human handlers or whatever. Like, that's what I'm envisioning. Like, it's Animal Farm.
Yeah, and I've come to the conclusion that the so-called white race is at this point completely genocidal. And when I say genocidal, I'm not talking about genociding other races. Self-genocide. Like there's a whole group of people that are participating in their own apocalypse.
Well, these are the white people who are going around acknowledging it and apologizing for their privilege.
Well, you want to bring up that video?
Okay, so let's not bring up the video because I don't want to I don't have the video handy. I don't want to get a strike, but I will describe the video and I will link to it in the description box. A few weeks ago, a video came out. There was a student at Weber State University in Utah who was a member of debate he's been debating in high school and college, and he had earlier been last year he'd gotten into a controversy because he had used Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson as a reference for something in one of his debate things, and they had said that that's not valid because those people are white supremacists or whatever. So this kid's already been up against controversy. But now that was when he was in high school. Now he's in college, and he's in a class, his debate class. These people participate in these debate competitions, all over the country and whatnot. And his debate teacher's name is Ryan Wash, who was a very successful college debater in his own right, and now he's a professor at this place. And there's audio. You hear audio of this kid talking with his professor, and the kid is being very polite and rational and reasonable, and talking to his teacher. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that everything is being revealed and it's just being rolled over. This professor is arguing to the kid that space doesn't exist. And when I first heard that, I'm like, great, let's talk about that, right? That's a great topic to debate, whether space exists or not. I'd lead towards the it doesn't exist side. But what he goes on to debate is that space doesn't exist because black people can't go there. That space is a white construct that is used to control the minds of black people, or that it is part of all of these things that are done to control, to oppress black people. And literally this kid is like, so you have this kid who normally I would be on the opposite side of somebody who was arguing that space is real. But of course, in this case, it was like he's basically saying, you hear him talking about, well, wait, there's black astronauts and whatnot. He's like, the teacher's like, well, they're supporting whiteness too. Space doesn't exist. I can't go there, so therefore it doesn't exist, right? Which is actually an argument I agree with on a certain level, but not because of it being racial. Like nobody. So there's all this argument going on. This kid has been kicked out of the debate stuff, maybe kicked out of the school. There's all sorts of stuff going on the internet about this, but nobody's talking about the real point, which is that the possibility of space not existing because it's not there, right? It has nothing to do with whether it's black people or white people. But this is where we're at. We're at this space where everything is being looked at in terms of race, class, oppression, and someone's lived experience being taking precedent over things that are actually verifiable facts, or that until now had been perceived to be verifiable facts, right? I would question whether space exists or not, but having nothing to do with race, having to do with the fact that there's actually been really almost no evidence presented to us that space exists other than that they say so, right? But that the point is missed. So that's happening with everything. Like they're telling us the truth about everything. Like you had this thing with your vaccines this weekend. He may get into a little bit of that. They're telling us the truth about everything, but just rolling over it because identity politics, herd mentality, blah, 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 right? A million different reasons. But I'm going to link to this video. You guys go and listen to that. And it's crazy. Like that this is what's going on in universities is basically like space doesn't exist because I'm black and I say so.
Right. Yeah. Although he should have brought up Sun Ra, who has a very famous jazz song called "Space Is the Place," and Sun Ra, says that he originated. He's from Saturn, right? He came from Saturn, so he could just come right back. But that's a whole different kind of argument. But to your point, to me, this is where we get into the whole like genocidal, like there's something. Like there's been like a death switch.
Well, there was one point in the video where the teacher also says that all the white people should be sent to space. Isn't there something in there like that?
Yeah.
You see, just send all the white people to space, which doesn't exist because black people can't go there. But that would be part of cleansing the world of white people so that black people can take over. The whole thing was so insane.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're living, in my estimation, in the time of the reset. Now, really quickly, I know because I got to go and transition out of here, but really quickly, one of the other things that I've noticed with commercials is the prevalence of redheads in commercials. And I just did a quick search. This goes all the way back to 2014, right? So I want to show this to you, which is what's up with all the redheads in TV ads. This is this is from 2014. And I can tell you that the percentage of redheads has increased. Commercials. Blondes may have more fun, but redheads are everywhere on TV. A new study found that 30% of network television ads during prime time featured someone with red hair.
Interesting.
I would say that number's gone up to about 70%. And in most cases, they tend to be women. Every now and then you'll see a redheaded boy.
Right.
Like a new commercial for Alexa, where this kid's walking around with headphones on in his wonderful reset Dream City land.
So are you talking about the giants that are red-haired?
Yeah. There are even clues that part of the reset model is what happened with the giants of the redheads.
Yeah.
They're like, here you are. They're here now.
Yeah.
And we're bringing it up, for your public consumption. So this is a very interesting time we're living in. And then, and it gets back to like the question is who's doing it, right? And I've got this is a whole nother thing where I think Ukraine plays a huge role in this, because Ukraine, out of all the kind of countries in that part of the world, has gone through like 5 or 6 revolutions, which are recent.
Has there been 9 yet?
I don't know if there's been 9, but there's been quite a few. And the most recent one was in 2014, right? So there's a reason why Ukraine keeps coming up.
Well, Ukraine isn't really interesting. I'm familiar with a lot of Ukrainian people from my gymnastics history. I know a lot of Russians and Ukrainians and whatnot. They're very interesting looking people. They're a little otherworldly looking. They look different from your standard Russian a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm thinking of a couple of the Ukrainians that I know, and some of them, there was a girl who won the Olympics in 1996. Her name was Lilia Podkopyeva. She's interesting looking. You have Oksana Bayul, the ice skater, also. They're all very otherworldly and unique looking. So this kind of goes to some of what you're talking about as well.
Right. So one of the things that I was looking at was the connection between Khazars and Tatars and Tatars, right? The Khazars being a group of people historically that lived in Khazaristan and Kazakhstan.
And also we talked about in our Patreon group last week, and it's on a video, all that stuff going on in Astana, Kazakhstan, and how crazy that place looks.
Yeah. So what's
talk about reset model?
There's actually a new DNA model called, I believe it's called Jewish 4, which links the majority of Ashkenazi people to their Khazaric ancestors. So where do they come from? Well, if you look at Ukraine, Crimea, Georgia, that's the area. And then I found this really interesting, this piece on Israel Times, fascinating, Times of Israel, which is leaked report, Israel acknowledges Jews, in fact, Khazars, secret plan for reverse migration to Ukraine. This is in the Times of Israel.
Wow.
Okay. This goes back to 2014.
Wow.
Right. So this goes into, this is a really in-depth article.
I'm getting an interesting feeling in my body as you're showing me this. I'm getting the confirmation, the sort of dowsing confirmation of my body. Yeah.
Yeah. So they get into Kessler, the 13th tribe, and he goes really deep into the Mossad, and they're talking about Ukraine being Khazaria 2.0.
Interesting.
And if you get into this, right, and then it's like the Khazars did not have to live within Auschwitz borders. This is the Israeli prime minister.
Yeah.
At the time, I guess it's Netanyahu, right? Even the great non-Zionist historian Simon Dubnow said we have the right to colonize Crimea. It's all in the history books. You can look it up.
Crimea River.
So there's something going on here, right?
Yeah.
There's something going on. Like, it's just really fascinating stuff. Really, really fascinating stuff and it's connected to this reset.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's connected to the reset. And And I'm not saying that these are the people that are controlling the resets.
Do you think there's a struggle between the West and Russia for control of the reset, and that's really what this whole like anti-Russian, Russia collusion, all that kind of crap is about?
Well, it's interesting because Putin brought this up, and he brought up the connection between the so-called Jewish people and the Khazars and the Tartars. He brought it up, and it wasn't that long ago.
Interesting.
And I don't know where Putin is on any of this stuff. I mean, I don't trust him. I don't trust any of these politicians. I'm not even sure it's Putin anymore. I mean, again, I don't know. But the fact that it's part of the public discourse is interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And of course, we look at the reset, right? The reset, which took place in 1917 in Russia, which is probably another version of an earlier reset where the Bolsheviks came in and literally wiped out the Tsar, the Tsaress, and millions of Russians during that time. So we're living in interesting times.
It is crazy. And every time we do this, we get into territory that we didn't plan to talk about, and you always tell me lots of things I didn't know, and I love doing this with you. It's a lot of fun. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. My mind is a little bit blown.
Yeah, and you know, I think maybe this is something that, as a theme, we can follow. You know, this is now we're tracking historical and contemporary narrative.
Yeah,
and
that sounds good.
We need to bring up for people, and one of the great things that, for now, I may not have an internet, I may not have a YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. Because YouTube has basically said if your channel can't be monetized.
We're going to go through we're going to go through. I don't think it will happen that quickly. I think it'll be a little bit slower. But yeah, the writing is on the wall. We're going to have to figure out another paradigm for doing what we do.
Another part of the reset, right? Because then now they're going to control everything.
Yeah, so we're going to have to just get creative. So stick with us here as Robert and I, maybe we'll be the ones to actually mash this matrix out and figure out what is really going on here. And for now, we'll be here on YouTube, but you may have to find us elsewhere in the future. So stick with us. We'll go for the wild ride. He's Mr. Toad. I'm Emily Moyer. And this has been Matrix Mash. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.